It was the kind of morning that wrapped the streets of downtown Chicago in a silver fog, not the kind that blanketed the buildings, but the one that slipped quietly into people's minds. A soft, almost invisible curtain of haste and indifference. People passed each other without seeing. Car horns bled into the background. And somewhere amidst the rhythm of hurried footsteps and coffee steam rising from sidewalk carts, a man stood, not begging, not shouting, just there. His name was Marcus. To most eyes, he looked like someone time had forgotten. Worn jeans frayed at the seams, a heavy navy coat patched on one sleeve, and shoes that spoke of long walks and little rest. His beard, though trimmed, was dusted with age and wind. But if you really looked, not glanced, but looked, you'd see the stillness in his posture wasn't defeat. It was something else. Something you couldn't name unless you'd lived with both wealth and loss. Something like patience, seasoned with pain. He stood outside a gleaming glass building with revolving doors that never stopped spinning, the headquarters of Weston & Company, one of the most powerful marketing firms in the state. The kind of place where ambition wore heels and deadlines, and people passed so quickly that noticing someone like Marcus felt inconvenient. Like a glitch in the system. Inside, Olivia checked her reflection in the elevator mirror. Flawless. Her tailored blazer hugged her shoulders like confidence, and her heels clicked like punctuation marks on the marble floor. She was 27, sharp, and rising, one of those people who had learned early that the world didn't slow down for anyone. Especially not for those who couldn't keep up. Her life was curated with precision, organic smoothies in the morning, inspirational quotes on her phone background, and a mental filter that sifted winners from losers before they even spoke. And that's why, when the elevator doors slid open and she stepped out onto the street with her phone pressed to her ear, she didn't really see Marcus. Or maybe she did, but only in the way you notice a crack on the pavement. Her voice was steady as she spoke into the phone, her eyes scanning the sidewalk like a GPS that didn't account for obstacles. He approached gently. Not with desperation, but with a kind of hesitant dignity. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low, like a radio turned just beneath the volume of the city's noise. "Could you spare a moment? She didn't stop. Not fully. Her eyes flicked toward him, just for a second. Her hand came up in that universal motion of refusal, a gesture not violent, but sharp enough to draw a line between two worlds. "I'm late," she said flatly and walked past. She didn't look back. She didn't see the way his shoulders lowered, not in shame, but like someone who'd just watched the door close for the 100th time. She didn't hear what he said next, softly, more to himself than to anyone else. "I understand." There was nothing extraordinary in that moment. No dramatic collapse, no shouted insult, no cinematic pause. Just another Tuesday, just another face among millions, a moment so small it barely echoed. But something in the air shifted. Not in the weather, but in the weight of things unsaid. Like a ripple you don't notice until the water reaches your feet. Olivia continued down the street, her thoughts already elsewhere, rehearsing bullet points for her morning presentation. Yet somewhere in the back of her mind, deep and quiet, a question took root. Not loud enough to break her focus. Just enough to tug at it. Why had he looked at her like that? Not with anger. Not even with disappointment. It was something more complicated. Something that didn't fit in her usual categories. It stayed with her, haunting the space between sentences and slides, like a sentence left unfinished. In the elevator, hours later, she caught herself checking her reflection again, not for smudged lipstick or flyaways, but for something she couldn't name. Something invisible. And when her coworker, Jenna, commented on the homeless guy out front, calling him a regular fixture, and probably just looking for drug money, Olivia nodded automatically, the way people do when they want to keep moving. But inside, something didn't sit right. The memory of his voice, calm, deliberate, refused to dissolve. Elsewhere in the city, Marcus entered a small coffee shop tucked between two towering buildings. The barista greeted him by name. He nodded in return. The shop wasn't glamorous, but it was warm, and more importantly, it was his. Or had been. Before everything changed. Before the company he built from scratch became a battlefield of contracts, betrayal, and masked intentions. Before the board voted him out. Before he let it happen, watching the empire he'd raised with his bare hands slip through his fingers in the name of progress. Now, he spent his days walking through the world unnoticed. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because sometimes the only way to see people clearly is to disappear from their expectations. He sipped his coffee and thought about the girl with sharp heels and sharper eyes. Not because she rejected him, that was common. But because she'd looked almost like someone he once knew. Someone who used to believe that value was found in bank accounts and business cards. Someone who didn't know yet that power without empathy was just another form of poverty. He had no intention of teaching her a lesson. Life would do that on its own. But what he didn't know, what she didn't know, was that fate had already begun stitching them together in ways neither could see. Back at Weston and Company, Olivia's day unraveled slowly. A client cancelled. A printer jammed. An intern botched a file upload. And when her manager handed her a new project, one involving an unusual case for corporate social responsibility, she barely concealed her frustration. The board's interested in a reintegration initiative, he said. Working with former CEOs who experienced homelessness. Apparently, one of them is local. Wants to stay anonymous, but he's agreed to a few interviews. Could be huge for our image. She blinked. Wait, a CEO? Who's homeless? Her manager shrugged. Technically, not anymore. But yeah, he's complicated. And he requested you, by name. The air thickened. Me? Why? No idea. Said he saw something in you. The room was too quiet. And just like that, her world, so neat, so fast, paused. A name she didn't know. A face she hadn't really seen. A voice that still echoed somewhere beneath her polished confidence. It couldn't be, could it? She swallowed the rising discomfort. Fine, she said. I'll take the meeting. But in her chest, something beat louder than ambition. A memory. A mistake. A beginning. And she didn't even know it yet, but she had just stepped into a story that would rewrite everything she thought she knew about success, humility, and the cost of looking away too soon. Olivia arrived at the cafe with her blazer still crisp but her certainty beginning to wrinkle. The building was modest, its brick exterior softened by ivy that crawled upward like time trying to reclaim its space. This wasn't the kind of place corporate meetings happened. No glass conference rooms, no lanyards, no overhead projectors humming in the background. Just the smell of brewed coffee and the quiet hum of people who preferred silence over spectacle. She stepped inside. Her heels echoed softly on the wooden floor, a sound that didn't belong here. The barista looked up, then nodded toward the corner without needing to ask. He's waiting for you, she said. That sentence tightened something in Olivia's chest. She didn't know why. Marcus was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. No suit. No laptop. Just a plain white mug in front of him, and eyes that had seen too much to waste time pretending otherwise. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, there was nothing theatrical. No dramatic recognition, no smirk, no line to be delivered like in a movie. Just a nod. Measured. Calm. She sat down across from him, unsure of how to begin. Her voice, usually so sharp in boardrooms, felt small here. I'm Olivia, she said, though she suspected he already knew. I know, Marcus replied. His tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't soft either. It was exact. Thank you for coming. There was a beat of silence, long enough to be awkward, but not long enough to leave. She forced a smile. So, you're the CEO everyone's talking about. His mouth twitched, not a smile, just the ghost of one. Was. Titles have an expiration date. She hesitated. Why me? He looked out the window. The city moved around them, unaware that something unspoken was hanging in the air like a question waiting to be answered. Because you didn't see me, he said simply. Her stomach flipped. She knew instantly what he meant. "You were the man outside the building," she said, barely above a whisper. He nodded once. "You walked right past me. Not out of cruelty, but out of calculation." She opened her mouth, ready to explain, to defend herself, but the words dried before reaching her lips. Because it was true. She had assessed him, categorized him, and dismissed him, all in less than 3 seconds. She wanted to say she was late, distracted, focused, but none of it changed what had happened. "You're not the first," he said. "And you won't be the last. That's not why I asked to meet you." Her voice returned, cautious. "Then why?" He leaned back, the wood of the chair creaking slightly. "Because there was something in your eyes. Even as you turned away. A hesitation. A flicker. It told me everything I needed to know." She frowned. "What did it tell you?" "That you're not as sure of yourself as you pretend to be." His words landed like a whisper turned into thunder. She should have felt insulted. Instead, she felt seen. Exposed, maybe. But not attacked. "And you think that qualifies me to help tell your story?" "No," he said. "I think that qualifies you to hear it." The silence between them shifted. Not empty now, but charged. Like two people standing at opposite ends of a bridge neither had built, but both needed to cross. She leaned in, intrigued despite herself. "So, what happened to you? Why would a man who ran a multi-million-dollar company end up alone on a sidewalk?" His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in memory. "Because I trusted the wrong people. Because I thought intelligence was enough. Because I ignored the quiet things, loyalty, intention, ego, in favor of numbers, deals, and speed. And when it fell apart, it didn't happen with an explosion. It happened in silence. Board votes. Smiles that meant war. Friends who became strangers in expensive suits." She swallowed hard. This wasn't the version of success she'd been sold. This wasn't the glamorous downfall of someone who'd flown too close to the sun. This was slower, colder, real. "And when it all ended?" she asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It didn't end. It just changed. I lost my name on a building, but I found something else. The ability to watch. To see how people treat each other when they think no one's watching." Her throat tightened. "And what do you see?" He paused, then answered with deliberate care. "That most people are running so fast, they forget to look. That kindness is often buried beneath urgency. That the richest people I've met lately don't wear watches." She looked down at her own, gold, expensive, precise. It suddenly felt heavy. "So what now?" she asked. "Why tell your story now?" He took a sip of coffee. "Because stories matter. But only when they're told by people who understand the cost of the truth. I don't need a redemption arc. I need a mirror held up to the world I once helped build. I need someone brave enough to tell the story without editing out the parts that sting." She nodded slowly. Something inside her was shifting, like tectonic plates beneath years of certainty. Not a collapse. A recalibration. "And you think I'm that person?" "I think you could be," he said. "If you stop looking with your resume and start looking with your soul." The words lodged deep. He stood up, reaching into his coat and placing a small card on the table. No logo. No title. Just a name, and a handwritten address. "When you're ready," he said, "come find the rest of the story. But don't come in heels." And just like that, he walked out, into the city that no longer saw him, yet couldn't move without him. She sat there for a long time, staring at the card. Her reflection in the window looked the same. But inside, everything had already begun to change. Olivia stared at the card for days. She kept it tucked in her wallet, behind her corporate ID badge, almost as if she didn't want to admit it was real. No one knew she had it. Not Jenna, not her manager, not even her reflection in the mirror. It felt like a secret that wasn't hers to carry, yet weighed more than all her accomplishments combined. The address was handwritten, tucked between two forgotten neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago. She looked it up online. No office. No digital footprint. No corporate logo glowing from the building like a badge of legitimacy. Just a name on a faded mailbox next to a chain-link fence. The kind of place you avoided if you didn't know someone on the inside. And yet, she went. Not because she was brave, but because something inside her had stopped being able to rest. It was a Saturday. No makeup. No heels. She wore sneakers and a denim jacket, clothes that felt too casual for her, and somehow still not humble enough. She took the train. Every stop closer to the address made her wonder if she was being stupid. Or worse, naive. She walked the last few blocks. The streets here were quieter, but not empty. Kids played in front yards with cracked pavement. A man washed his car with a bucket and an old rag, humming something off-key. A woman sold tamales from a cart, her hands moving with the kind of rhythm only repetition can teach. And then she saw it. The building looked more like a renovated warehouse than anything official. It had no sign, no doorman, no suggestion of wealth. Just a single blue door with chipped paint and a metal knocker. She almost turned around. But the door opened before she could. Marcus stood there, holding a cup of coffee in one hand, wearing the same coat he'd worn outside her office. But here, it didn't look out of place. Here, it looked like it belonged. "You came," he said. Not surprised. Not proud. Just certain. "I almost didn't." He nodded, stepping aside. That's the part that matters most. The inside was unexpected. Not luxurious, but alive. There were books everywhere. Shelves of them, stacked not just for show but use. A few tables, a worn leather couch, framed photographs of people, not places. Not awards. Faces. Stories. Evidence of life lived with eyes open. "What is this place?" she asked. He gestured around them. "It used to be a shipping hub. Now it's something else. A space for re-entry. For rebuilding. For remembering." Remembering what? That people are more than what they lost. She followed him past a long hallway lined with photos. Men and women, most of them older, some younger, none of them polished. But their eyes told stories. Survival. Grit. Grace under pressure. "They work with you?" she asked. "They build with me," he corrected. "Some are former execs. Others were warehouse staff. One was my accountant before the crash. We all ended up here by different roads. But the destination." He let the sentence hang. She stepped into a room that looked like a hybrid between a classroom and a strategy lab. A whiteboard was filled with names, dates, phrases like rebuild trust and teach beyond skills. At one table, a woman in her 50s was helping a man practice how to introduce himself during a job interview. Across the room, someone was editing a spreadsheet while another sketched plans for a startup. "This isn't charity," Olivia said quietly. "No," Marcus replied. "It's legacy." She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time, she saw not a man who had fallen from power, but one who had stepped down on purpose to find something deeper. Not redemption. Not pity. Truth. "Why did you really want me to see this?" He leaned against the doorway, folding his arms. "Because you live in a world that values what people do more than who they are. I lived there too. I helped build it. But somewhere along the line, I forgot that power isn't earned, it's borrowed. And if you don't use it to lift others, it ends up using you." She felt that sentence in her spine. "I wasn't ready to hear this a week ago," she admitted. He smiled. "Most people aren't. Until something breaks." She looked around again. The laughter from the next room, the quiet confidence of the people creating something from nothing, the lack of pretense. It all felt like another world. One that lived right beside hers, unnoticed. "I don't know how to tell this story," she said. "Yes, you do. You just have to stop trying to impress and start trying to understand. That night, Olivia went home different. Not loud different. Not dramatic different. But the kind of different that whispers in your thoughts and rewrites what you think you know. She looked at her apartment, modern, minimal, everything in its place, and for the first time, it felt hollow. Not bad. Just insufficient. She sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. Not to work, but to remember. She began typing. Not the story Marcus had asked her to tell, but the one she had just begun to live. A story about blindness and sight. About the quiet weight of dignity. About the danger of walking too fast to feel. She didn't know where it would end. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't writing to be right. She was writing to be real. Olivia didn't pitch the story on Monday. She could have. She knew exactly how to do it. She could have sold Marcus as a visionary fallen from grace, wrapped his story in buzzwords, built a redemption arc, and slapped a corporate bow on it. That's what Weston and Company wanted. Something digestible, inspiring, marketable. But she didn't want to sell him. She wanted to understand him. She sat through meetings that morning in a daze, half listening to talk about analytics, conversions, Q4 projections. It all felt strangely muted, like someone had turned the volume down on her life. What used to energize her now felt manufactured, predictable, hollow. Around noon, she opened her laptop and began writing again. Not a press release. Not a pitch deck. A story. His story. The real one. But she didn't get far. Because a message came through, a short, unexpected email from Marcus. Come by tonight. There's someone I want you to meet. No cameras. No notebooks. Just presence. No signature. No subject line. She stared at the screen for a full minute before closing her laptop. That night, the wind was sharp. One of those Chicago gusts that slipped between your collar and skin, reminding you how fragile comfort really was. She wore boots this time, a hoodie under her coat. Nothing about her looked like a rising executive. And for once, she didn't care. Marcus opened the door before she knocked. This time, the building was busier. The lights inside were warm, and laughter floated through the halls. People moved in and out of rooms carrying boxes, folders, food. It didn't feel like a center. It felt like a village. Come on, he said, already walking. She followed him down a narrow hallway that opened into a back room. A single desk. A chair. A large window overlooking a cracked basketball court. And in the corner, a man, maybe in his late 60s, sitting with his hands folded on his lap like he'd been waiting a long time. This is Elijah, Marcus said. He's the reason I'm still standing. The man looked up and smiled. His eyes were a map of hard roads. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and steady. Marcus was sleeping under the bridge off Jackson Avenue when I found him. Olivia's breath caught. Marcus said nothing. He just stood by the window, letting the words land. I wasn't trying to save anyone, Elijah continued. I was just doing what someone once did for me. A coat. A meal. A question that didn't feel like pity. That's all it took. He turned to her. You ever seen someone at their bottom and still believed they were meant for more? She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because the truth was uncomfortable. She hadn't. Not really. She'd seen potential only where society said to look. Resumes, wardrobes, clean shoes, tight schedules. Not in tired eyes or trembling hands. Marcus didn't tell me who he used to be, Elijah went on. Didn't matter. All I needed to know was who he could still become. There was silence after that. Not awkward, sacred. Olivia finally found her voice. Why are you showing me all this? Marcus looked over, his expression softer now. Because you can't write about transformation if you've never witnessed it. You have to feel it, not format it. She looked at Elijah again, this man who had no LinkedIn, no accolades, no polished past, and yet, somehow, had rebuilt the life of a CEO with nothing but attention and time. "I've spent my career turning people into stories," she said quietly. "But I never realized how much of their truth gets lost between the edits." "That's the cost of distance," Elijah said. "You can't love what you're trying to control." Those words sliced something open. And suddenly, Olivia felt it, that dizzying sensation of walls collapsing. Not all at once, but brick by brick. Everything she thought made her important now felt irrelevant. Her education, her titles, the brands on her business cards. What did any of it mean, really, if she couldn't recognize the humanity standing in front of her? Marcus broke the silence with a single sentence. "Come back next week." "For what?" she asked. "To listen. Not just to me. To all of them. Every person here has a story, and none of them start the way you think." She nodded slowly. Then, as she turned to leave, Elijah called after her. "One more thing." She stopped. "When you write this, and I know you will, don't make Marcus the hero." She frowned. "Why not?" "Because the real hero is the moment he let himself be seen." That night, Olivia didn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her carefully curated apartment, thinking about the weight of what she'd heard. Of how close she'd come to walking right past it all. Past Marcus, past the invitation, past the lesson she didn't know she needed. And that's when it hit her. This wasn't a story about a poor man who turned out to be powerful. It was about how quickly we forget that power, real power, comes from the courage to break. To lose. To begin again with nothing but your name and your breath. She got out of bed, opened her laptop, and deleted every word she'd written. Then, she began again. But this time, not from his fall. She started with her own blindness. The next time Olivia returned, she didn't bring questions. She brought silence. It was a strange shift for her, to enter a room not to speak, not to present, but to absorb. 4 years, she'd worn confidence like armor, each conversation an opportunity to assert her worth. But now, she came empty-handed. And, for once, that felt right. Inside the center, the energy was different. It wasn't just movement or noise. It was purpose. People weren't busy, they were becoming. You could feel it in the way they greeted each other, in the laughter between tasks, in the care behind even the smallest actions. Marcus wasn't waiting for her. He was with a group in the back, helping a young man revise a resume. Olivia didn't interrupt. She sat in the corner, notebook closed, just listening. Across the room, a woman in her 40s was practicing how to answer job interview questions. Her voice trembled at first. But another woman, maybe 60, silver hair pulled back in a tight bun, placed a hand on hers, steadying her. "You're not what you lost," she whispered. "You're what you survived." Olivia felt her chest tighten. No motivational quote on Instagram had ever hit like that. Later, Marcus sat beside her, handing her a cup of weak coffee in a paper cup. She smiled, accepting it without complaint. "You're not asking anything today," he said, almost teasing. "I don't have the right questions yet." He nodded. "That's when you're closest to the truth." She paused, then looked at him. "Did you ever hate them?" "The board." He gave a dry laugh. "No. I pitied them. They were protecting what they built. Even if it meant killing what made it worth building." She studied his face. Not the lines of age, but the lines of clarity. He wasn't bitter. He was awake. "You never fought back?" "I did. But not in the way they expected. I didn't sue. I didn't go public. I disappeared. Not because I was weak, but because I knew something they didn't." "What?" He leaned in slightly. "That the people who look down on the broken usually fear becoming them. And you can't change someone by shouting over their fear. You change them by surviving louder than their silence." Olivia sat with those words like they were a riddle. Or a mirror. "I used to think people earned success," she said slowly. Now I wonder if we just inherit it from people we never questioned. That's not your fault, Marcus said. But it is your responsibility. She looked around the room again. The old couch. The folding chairs. The battered whiteboard. Nothing about this place screamed power. And yet, she'd never felt more impacted by any boardroom in her life. That night, she walked home through the city differently. She noticed the woman sleeping near the subway, and not just in passing. She saw the man sweeping the front of his shop, humming off tune, talking to himself. She noticed the couple arguing outside the diner, both of them clutching a paper bag as if it contained the last piece of their dignity. The city hadn't changed. But she had. She realized with a quiet kind of ache that the story wasn't just about Marcus anymore. It wasn't even just about this center. It was about all the people she'd never noticed before. The ones she'd passed on the way to somewhere important. The ones she judged with her eyes before they ever spoke. She had been blind in a suit. Now, her vision was waking up barefoot. The day Olivia submitted the story, her hands shook slightly. Not from fear, at least not the kind she used to know. This was a different kind of trembling. The kind that came when something true finally leaves your chest. Like holding your breath for too long and finally exhaling. She didn't package it with buzzwords. She didn't smooth out the edges. She wrote it raw, just like Marcus had asked. Just like life had demanded. Her manager didn't get it. "This isn't what the board wanted," he said, flipping through the printed pages like he was skimming a menu, not a soul. "I know," she replied. "It's what they need." He looked at her like she'd grown wings, or maybe lost her mind. Either way, she didn't flinch. She knew the risk. This wasn't a promotional piece. It wasn't neat or safe. There were no metaphors wrapped in clichés. It didn't position the company as a savior. It positioned it as a mirror. A week passed before she heard anything. Then came the email. "We want to run it. Unedited. Internal release first. You're scheduled to speak next Friday at the Leadership Summit. Prepare remarks." She stared at the screen, her breath catching. Not because she had won, but because for once, the truth had. That Friday, she stood on a stage in front of people who had never seen her this way. Her hair wasn't curled. Her shoes weren't sharpened to a point. She wore a simple black blouse and flats. Stripped down. Honest. She began not with Marcus's story, but her own. "I used to think I was good at reading people," she said, voice steady. "But the truth is, I was only good at filtering them. Based on things that don't matter. Watches, job titles, shoes. I thought I was smart. Turns out, I was blind." There was a ripple in the room. A stillness. "I met a man who changed everything. Not because he taught me something new, but because he reminded me of what I already knew and had forgotten. That every person has weight. That kindness isn't a favor, it's a responsibility. That dignity doesn't wear a name tag." She paused, scanning the room. Executives. Directors. Influencers. All of them taught to hide behind polish. All of them suddenly stripped of their comfort. "The man I rejected outside our building wasn't asking for money," she continued. "He was offering me something, the chance to see. And I didn't. Not because I was cruel. But because I didn't think I needed to." She let the silence sit. Then she told them Marcus's story, not as a fall and rise, but as a slow burn, a quiet death, and a quieter rebirth. She told them about the center. About Elijah. About the woman who whispered, "You're not what you lost." And then she ended with one final sentence. "I didn't write this story to make you feel something. I wrote it because I know what happens when we stop feeling anything at all." Applause didn't come immediately. It wasn't the kind of speech people clapped for without thinking. It was the kind that lingered. That rearranged furniture inside people's minds. Afterward, one by one, people approached her. Not with praise, but with confessions. I think I've been blind too. I used to be like that. I walked past someone yesterday and pretended not to see. She listened. She didn't offer comfort, just presence. Like Marcus had. Like Elijah had. The story spread, first internally, then outside company walls. It wasn't trending. It wasn't viral. But it was unforgettable. People didn't share it to impress. They shared it because it hurt. Because it healed. 2 weeks later, Olivia returned to the center. No invitation. No agenda. She just showed up. Marcus was in the kitchen, washing dishes with a younger man who kept cracking jokes. Olivia stood in the doorway, smiling. "You're becoming very bad at disappearing," she said. He glanced over his shoulder, smirking. That was never the point. He dried his hands and walked over. There was no grand greeting. Just two people who knew they had traveled through something irreversible. "The story landed," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "How?" "Because I got a letter yesterday. From the board." Her eyes widened. "And they apologized." She blinked. "Wait. Really?" He nodded. "Not with money. Not with empty words. With something real. They asked if I'd come back. As a mentor. Not to lead, but to teach. And will you?" He looked at her, eyes calm. "No. Because this," he gestured around the center, "is what I built with my fall. And it's stronger than what I built with my rise." She felt something shift again in her chest. The kind of shift that doesn't come from logic, but from soul. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No. Because if I hadn't lost everything, I would have never learned how to really see." There was a pause. Then Olivia did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged him. Not out of pity. Not out of gratitude. But out of something deeper. Recognition. The next day, she walked past the same spot where she had once dismissed him. This time, there was a different man standing there. Same coat. Same hesitation in the eyes. She didn't look away. She stopped. And smiled. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice low, warm. The man blinked, surprised. Then nodded slowly. "I am now." And in that moment, simple, unnoticed by the world, the loop closed. Not with fanfare. But with awareness. The story was never about the man she rejected. It was about the part of herself she finally accepted. The part that remembered. No one is invisible when you choose to see. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.